My countrymen, this is Eli Velislao Pamatong, President of the Republic of the Philippines. And once again, tonight I have come to share with you vital issues concerning the country. But unlike the many issues that I talked to you about in the past, I'm going to talk to you about an issue that concerns every Filipino and those children yet unborn. In the more than 70 years of our history as a republic, the Philippines is facing the greatest problem, crisis. This crisis can either destroy all of us, or it can mean the start of a new beginning. It can destroy us completely. Just like the Israelites lost their country for more than 1,000 years, but luckily they were able to go back to the promised land. Now we are facing a crisis greater in magnitude than all other crises faced by our forefathers through our existence as a people. And we must face this crisis with all the resources at our command, with all the knowledge available to us. Because if we fail, I repeat, if we fail, we will lose our country and the Filipino race will fade into oblivion, into the dark recesses of history, into the backwaters of history. When Senator Hontiveros mentioned about 4 million Chinese allowed to enter in 2017 by the Duterte puppet government, I was some kind of doubtful about it. I heard about it long before Hontiveros came out in the social media about 4 million Chinese allowed to come here with visas already prepaid by the Duterte government. And recently about 27,000 were allowed to come here as retirees. Retired now, but they were 35 years old, most of them 35 years old. And so I tried to inquire from my friends abroad. You know, I have been abroad for 30 years. I work as a criminal investigator in the United States. And then I practiced as a lawyer for 30 years after I worked as a criminal investigator of the government. My friends abroad confirm, in a way, the information of Senator Hontiveros and what I heard in the past, that 4 million Chinese entered the Philippines in 2017 and hundreds of thousands before that through the northern entry, northern door. And so there are about maybe 20 million Chinese in the Philippines now. About 10 million have been here already, and the newcomers are about 10 million. Most of these are soldiers, Chinese soldiers in the Philippines. And they are here for a purpose. That's why I decided to talk to you tonight, to address the country tonight, in spite of the fact that I am not feeling well. Because I feel it is important that you know. It does not matter if you don't believe me. As a matter of fact, most of you have been doubtful about what I said, suspecting the motives of what I said. But the most important thing is I'm telling you the truth. And whether you believe it or not, that's not my problem anymore. There are Chinese soldiers in the Philippines. According to information, about 500,000 uh, regulars, army from the Chinese Communist Army, and about 500 million support group like medics, paramedics, doctors, nurses. They are here already. And you might be wondering how they were able to come inside the Philippines that fast and that many. Napakarami. Before I proceed to that point and explain, let me look back. Let me steal a glance at history. Because history can guide us. You know, according to George Santayana, a Spanish personality who grew up in America, he went there when he was 8 years old and he was educated in Harvard. He had this famous aphorism. He said that those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it. Yun daw hindi makalaala sa nangyari, uulitin nila kasi nalimutan yung nangyari. Now, let me now steal a glance at some points in history, including the legends that could apply to our situation today. The legendary stories in Greece, long time ago. Like the story in Homer's Iliad about the Trojan War. In the Trojan War, the Greeks had a hard time entering Troy because it was so well guarded. This concerns a famous woman named Helen of Troy. They had a very hard time entering Troy because the gates were so tall and so firm and impregnable. So what happened was that there was someone among the Greeks who thought of inventing a huge horse, a hollow wooden horse, like this horse, this one, this horse. It's a horse, but it can contain about maybe 100 soldiers inside. Inside the belly is the famous Trojan horse. And everybody in our country, I think, those who have gone to college, are aware of the Trojan horse. And so one day, the Greeks donated the horse to Troy. I give it as a gift to the Trojans in the name of peace. The Trojans, Troy, the people of Troy, welcomed it as a gift of the gods. And so the horse entered Troy. And then once it entered, after it was welcomed by thousands of people. At night, the soldiers from the belly of the horse came down, opened the gates, and burned Troy. That's the story. You're able to enter Troy because of the Trojan horse. That is the story of the Trojan horse. Now, I would like to relate that to what's going on in the Philippines. You'll be asking, paano ba nakapasok itong napakaraming Chekwa dito in Czech? We have what could be compared to the Trojan horse. This to me, he does not look very handsome, could be compared to the Trojan horse. The Chinese chose him to lead his country, knowing that he could not really lead, but he could be dictated. As far back as many years ago, they know that he was a homosexual and he could be exploited. He was a drunkard, he smoked a lot. They studied him, even the Americans knew him. And so they tried to win his heart. And I think they succeeded. To first they entered his heart, not the gates of Troy, no. They entered his heart. And one day, Digong said, more than ever, I love Genping. I love Genping very much. Hindi niya ginamit yung word like, no? I love Genping very much. More than ever, I need Genping. You know, those are expressions of love. A man who is so in love with somebody. And so nahawak ang gate ng puso, na napasok ng mainchik yung puso ni Digong. Napasok ang puso ni Digong at naging perlinti. Andoon ang inchik sa loob. Yung parang Trojan horse yun si Digong. And ito, nakipakita ko na sa inyo in previous recordings. This really is the artist's idea of the closeness of the relationship between Duterte and Genping, as could be concluded from the facts surrounding that relationship. Very close. And there's another Chinese, who is just like Genping, na napamahal rin ni Duterte. More than a wife, kasi masisaan siya nagpunta. Ano siya? Matawag sa English, ubiquitous. Masisaan, ano? So, dalawang Chinese, masabi natin, the way, pag tinignan mo ang nangyari, dalawang Chinese na naghahawak sa puso niya. Ang ginamit siya ngayon, like a Trojan horse. Kasi through Digong, yun, yung 4 million Chinese, most of whom were soldiers, came through Digong. Digong, who has been in the Philippines and who has already been close to Bongo and to Genping, opened the gates of the Republic to 4 million Chinese soldiers. Maybe not all of them really were soldiers. In fact, the CIA said 45,000 are fully armed. But according to my information from other sources, about 500,000. 5 times bigger than the armed forces of the Philippines. Andito na. And another support group, about 500,000, consisting of nurses, doctors, technicians, operators, radio operators, etc. Andun, kumpleto sila. Now, nakapasok yan dahil kay Duterte. But even before that, nagpasok na yan dito dahil sa mga politiko nating mga kawatan. They have been coming through the northern door sa Ilocos. Araw-araw may 100, 200, 300 to replace the Chinese that died here. Kaya nga, wala masyadong inchik na nalibing dahil pag namatay ang inchik, it is taken over by somebody in China. Papasok dito using the name of that person that died. So anyway, sa suma-suma, mga estimate lang ito, 20 million ang Chinese dito. And they are controlling the economy. Like I said in my previous recording, they own 312 airlines. Yung lahat ng airlines, sa kanila yung karamihan dyan. About 202 mga barko, vessels. About 140,000 buses, 21,000 taxis, and of the 1.2 million cars, siguro mga 1 million yung sa inchik dyan sa Pilipinas, kanila yung karamihan. So in case of war, magamit nila ito. Wala tayo, talagang tagilid tayo. They can use this 202 vessels, na barko. They can use the 312 planes, cargo planes, as cargo to transport them anywhere. They can use the taxis, they can use the 140,000 buses. Most of them are owned by Chinese. Talagang disadvantage tayo. Nakapasok sila. And so anyway, ang purpose nila, if you ask me, ang purpose nila is really this simple. They are not here to seize the government now. No. They are not here to occupy the Philippines. They are here just in case there is a war between China and America. The moment that war starts, the Chinese and the Philippines, the Chinese army will immediately seize the government, the entire country. Anong purpose? To deny the Americans the use of all the bases in the Philippines, to deny the Americans the use of the Philippines as basis for military operations. So kaya preempt nila, inunahan nila. Ito, nagbantay sila anytime they can take over the Philippines. Kaya nga, totoo yung sinabi ni Digong that pag nagkunita kayo sa akin, I will call the Chinese army and they will protect me. I thought that he was joking, but no, they are here. And the army is aware of that, the Philippine army. The members of the armed forces of the Philippines are aware of that the Chinese are in fact here 5 times, 6 times, 7 times bigger than the armed forces of the Philippines. Kaya siguro, that's the reason why, aside from the fact na binibigyan silang bilyon-bilyon yung mga generals, tulad ni Lorenzana, hindi ko magalaw dahil aside from the fact na busog, sabi ni Digong, takot rin. Kasi ang dami ng mga inchik dito, about 5 times bigger than the armed forces of the Philippines and the police. Alam nila through the ISAP, yung intelligence service of the armed forces, alam nila. Kaya hindi alam ng mga tao, tinago sa mga tao kasi baka magpanik ang tao na nakaparaming inchik dito. And so again, ito ang Trojan horse natin. Ito ang Trojan horse. And ito ang naghawak sa kanya ngayon. Yung puso niya, hawak na hawak yung puso ng Trojan horse natin. My God, no? Hawak yung puso ng Trojan horse natin. Kaya nga, kung hawak niya yung de facto president of the Philippines, maski mayor lang yan, hindi naman talaga presidente, pero siya ang kontrol ng army. So in effect talagang kontrolado ng China ang army through Duterte, even if Duterte said he was not properly elected. Siya ang nagkontrol. Kaya nga, malaki ang advantage nila sa atin. Kasi kontrolado yung presidente. Yung lahat ng nasabi ko na 312 airlines, 202 kabarko, mga vessels, shipping lines, about 140,000 buses, about 21,000 taxis, 1.2 million cars, and all other transportation facilities, kontrolado ng insect. At about 98% of the Chinese who are in the Philippines are advanced in terms of business experience sa Filipino. Wala yung Filipino. Mas intellectually advanced sila. Kaya tayo, inaapi, ginawa tayo mga kuhan dito. Ginagawa tayong utusan. So, yun. Kaya nga, malakas ang loob nila na magtayo na ganito sa lahat ng kampo ng army. Kasi nabayaran yung army. Sa buong Pilipinas, mamulaklak ng ganitong telecommunication facilities ng China to be used by the Chinese army. Pati yung Sanglik, kukunin nila. Yung pinakamalakas ng defensa sa Pilipinas, kukunin nila. Para yung pinakamalakas na lugar, yung pinaka-strategic na lugar, makuha nila. Kaya maski nag-complaint na si Bacordo, yung admiral doon, hindi yan pinakigan. So, one day you will see many telecommunication towers like this all over the Philippines. And ibig sabihin, talagang kontrolado ang army ng, kontrolado ang army ng China. And the army, nagpakontrol dahil nabili at takot rin sa China. So, ganoon, ano ba gawin natin? Ang plano ko, nasabi ko na sa inyo, dahil napakalaki yung insect, alam mo kung ano kalaki yung forces sa China, yung soldiers nila? 2.8 million. 2.8 million. Doble kalaki sa Amerika. It's the biggest armed force in the world. Paano natin matalo-talo dyan? Ang laki-laki. Paano natin mag-raise tayo ng army na ganun? Paano natin mapakain yung pamilya? Bigyan uniforme. Kaya meron akong sikreto na we will raise 20-man army. Paano i-raise yan? Na wala matayang pera. Madali lang. I will create a republic, military republic of the Philippines. Military Republic of the Philippines. Lahat ng mga tao sa loob ng Pilipinas, ayun, they will be soldiers. They are born soldiers. They will grow up as soldiers. From the time they start walking, they wear uniforms up to the time that they are soldiers. And they will have to buy their own uniforms. They will buy their own armas. We will all be armed. And then we will be helping each other. That's why lahat pwedeng may bahay. Lahat pwedeng may trabaho. Kasi army tayong lahat. And if we do that, if we transform the Philippines into a military republic, kaya nating mag-raise ng 70 to 80 million soldiers. Kasi lahat sundalo At hindi na tayo kailangan mag-raise ng so much money to maintain an army because they will maintain themselves. That's the advantage of creating a military republic. Kaya nga nag-draft ako ng executive decree transforming the Philippines into a military republic. Perma na lang ni Digong ang kulang, pero hindi naman pipirma si Digong. Kasi alam mo na-discover ko talagang tuta ng China siya. Tuta ng China. So to repeat, ang purpose ng mga Chinese dito, about 500 million armed forces na fully armed, plus mga technical supports, mga medics, doctors, nurses, operators, machine operators, whatever, drivers. Ang purpose nila is not to seize the Philippines now. No. They will not do that because they are afraid that if you do that now, America will come in and trigger the Third World War. Because America cannot give up the Philippines. They need the Philippines more than they need other countries. So ayaw nilang kukunin ng Pilipinas ngayon. Nagantay sila that may mag-start ang Third World War, kunin agad ang Pilipinas. Para yung mga Amerikano hindi makagamit sa Pilipinas as base for military operations against China. They will preempt that. So yun, handa yan anytime. And then, if the USA, the Americans lose the war, mas maigi. Kasi the Philippines now will be transformed into the province of China. So they are shooting two birds with one stone. Occupy China now, and eventually use the Philippines as a base against America. And if America lose the war, China will occupy the Philippines as a province. Kaya maganda yung plano nila, di ba? Hindi naman magagago ng Egypt. In fact, bakit sila may 2.8 million army? Meron silang 2.8 million army. Dahil sabi ni Sun Tzu, yung Chinese of long ago, about 5,000 years ago, 500 years ago, the best way to go to war is not to go to war. That's kind of contradictory. Paano ka panalo ng gera kung hindi ka papunta sa gera? Ang ibig pala sabihin ni Sun Tzu, you prepare, be so big, be so armed, na kung makita kayo sa kalaban mo, they will not even think of fighting you. Kasi siguradong silang matalo. So yun ang ibig sabihin. If you want to win a war, you can win a war without going to war because you are so prepared that in the eyes of the opponent, it is impossible to beat you. Masusuko na lang para nagira kasi prepared ka sa labanan. Yun ang ginawa ng Egypt. Nilakihan yung army nila. And problema natin ngayon, wala tayong unity. Wala tayong unity. Dahil yun ang problema ng Indians. There were 574 Indian nations in America. Sabi, natalo ng mga Amerikano. Mga Europeans pumunta doon, talo yung 574 Indian nations, Red Indians. Talo. Bakit? Well, primarily, they were disunited. Hindi sila united. Tulad doon sa nangyari sa Sparta. Hindi sila united. Kaya nga King Leonidas was wiped out. The forces of King Leonidas were wiped out at the small pass at Thermopylae. Dahil they are not united. But in spite of the fact that they were not united, that victory was in effect a victory for Sparta because maski 300 men lang yung daladala ni King Leonidas, that 300 men killed 20,000 Persians. Kasi yung sa Thermopylae, may pass doon, na single file lang yung makapasok. Binantayan niya ni King Leonidas. He was able to kill about 20,000. But na-wipe out rin sila. But that gives Sparta a time to prepare. Kung united lang sana yung dalawang hari sa Sparta, hindi nga makapasok si Xerxes, hindi matalo si Leonidas kung united. But there were two kings in Sparta at the time, and they were not united. And Sparta was ruled by council of elders. So anyway, the problem in the time of the case of Leonidas, King Leonidas, was they were not also united. Ang problema sa mga Indians, they were not united. They were also fighting each other. And then mayroon pang mga natural calamities na pumasok. Ano yung mga natural calamities na pumasok? Yung smallpox killed about 90% of the Indians. 90%. Imagine if the coronavirus will kill 90% of the Filipinos. Sabi, majority yung insect nito. But 90% of the native Indians were killed by smallpox. At weekend yan, nadagdag yung nagpahina sa kanila. Yung may opium sila doon. Yung tobacco, opium. Then, nagdala ng nagnegosyo yung mga Amerikano ng firewater, yung liquor. Naging addicted yung mga warrior sa mga Indians. Lahat ng mga, hindi naman siguro sila dyan, Amerikano, nagdala ng maraming liquor doon, nagdala ng opium, humihina yung internal resistance ng 574 Indian nations. Humihina. Until they were wiped out and driven into the reservations. Right now they live in reservations. Ang naghari sa Amerika, yung mga bisita ni mga puti. Why? Because the Indians were not united. So, going back, the Greeks were not united. That's why they lost to Persia in the Battle of Thermopylae. The Americans, the American Indians were not united. That's why they were occupied by the white Americans. All countries in the world, like the Philippines, may nagtanong, why was it easier for the foreigners to conquer the Philippines? There was a unanimous answer by the historians. They were not united. It was too easy for the Spaniards to conquer the Filipinos. And why were the Americans able to conquer the impregnable Muslims in the south? They were easy to bribe. Binabriban. So, mga Amerikano, pinadala yung mga anak ng mga Muslim doon sa Amerika. Yung iba, katulad ni Tarhata, Princess Tarhata Kiran. Pinaaral doon, naging Americanized yung ugali. Binibigyan ng pera hanggang the Muslims entered into some kind of treaty or agreement na ma-under sila na Amerika, but they had to retain certain rights. Yun. They were disunited and they were bribed. Ang ginawa ng mga inject, they improvised on this, they improvised on the approach in the past. Like yung approach ng mga British na nagtinda ng mga opium doon sa China until one day the Chinese were so weak na kuha ng British yung Hong Kong. I think for 99 years, extended to another 99 years. So in-improve ng insect itong nangyari in the past. Yung strategy na in the past na talagang efektibo at yung natural calamity ginamit rin ng insect. So, anong ginawa nila? Ang ginawa nila, tulad sa mga Amerikano, they entered the United States, populated the United States, and control the United States. Ang mga incheck, massive migration ang ginawa nila para darating maaraw, dahil hindi naman edukado ang karamihang Filipino, ma-under nila. And if they can bring in 100 million, 200 million na Chinese into the Philippines, wala na. Minority na tayo, we will lose the Philippines forever. That's why sabi ko, we are facing the greatest crisis in history. The greatest crisis. If we cannot face or solve this crisis, we will have to say goodbye to each other. Masakit. So the first approach na may incheck, massive migration. 4 million 2017. Bago lang mayroong ito na kita ko, 27,000 retirees na ito. 27,000 retirees. Nag-retire, 35 years old. Mga sundalo ito, mga experts ito. And earlier than that, ito ang part sa 4 million. 4 million na pinasok dito. Most of these are military personnel. Nandito na ngayon. Bigger than Quezon City. Yung mga inchik na pumasok, bigger than Quezon City. Pinaalam ko sa inyo ito. Kasi pag nag-uniforme yan, ganito ang mukha. Ganito ang mukha. Kaya tatakbo yung Armed Forces of the Philippines. Train na train ito eh. Sa gera. So, tingnan mo. Yeah. There are about 500,000 there. 5 times bigger than the Armed Forces. Now, I cannot show you concrete documents to support this. Naturally, nanggaling ito sa intelligence gathering agencies ng kausap ko eh. At saka nakita ko rin, sa mata ko, nakita rin ni Senator Hontiveros ang nangyari na marami talagang incheck na pumasok dito. Out of the 2.18 million pala. Not 2.8 million. 18 million. Na sundalo sa China na pumasok dito na nag-mix sa mga tao dito. At hindi na natin malaman kung saan nagpunta. Doon sa Cagayan de Oro, may mga hotel doon na puro i-check yung nakatira. Diyan sa Binondo, maraming hotel dyan occupied by Chinese. At pinatrabaho ni Digong. Ang sweldo napakalaki. Siguro 6,000 whatever. Hinahatid pa ng mga limousine. Ang mga Filipino, 6,000, 600, 400. So the Chinese have no problems with employment in the Philippines because Digong is giving them employment. The Filipinos will have to go abroad, torn from the warmth and embrace of their family to sustain those who are left behind. But the Chinese are coming here because they are promised employment. They have ready employment. They have no problems with employment in the Philippines now. They are readily employed. So gano'n, ang nangyari. Ang pasok na mga inchik, massive migration. Marami sila, maski saan ka tumitingin sa Manila, may mga chikwa. Maliliit yung mata, makita mo tulad sa mata ko maliit. Yun. And then, the next step, number 2, business operations. Massive business operations. That's why they control hundreds of malls throughout the Philippines through the billionaires. They control a chain of stores throughout the Philippines, about 4,000 chain. Kontrolado nila yan through business. Migration through business. And so, that control of business means, nasabi ko na, control of airlines, control of shipping lines, control of bus transportations, control of taxis, control of almost everything. Shopping centers, shopping malls, the best subdivisions, the best cars, sa kanila lahat. Yun. That is conquest by economic, by business operations. And the third, ini-improve nila yung nangyari sa China at saka sa mga Indians. They used drugs to weaken the Filipinos. Yung nangyari sa Amerika at saka sa China noon, siguro hindi naman sinadya ng mga British. Hindi sinadya ng mga Arabo at Indians nagdala ng opium doon sa China. But ito sinasadya nila. Kasi humihina talaga yung tao na nag-drugs walang prinsipyo, walang morals. So ginamit nila. So it's conquest. Number 3, through drugs. Tinawag ko yan chemical warfare against the Filipino people. And then the other approach was conquest through actual occupation of the territories in the Philippines like the West Philippine Sea. Actual occupation, lantaran, babuyan, kinuha nila. So that's the fourth approach that they did. Ngayon, the mainland is being occupied. Economically, militarily, they are occupied. Hindi natin alam mga bulag tayo. Hindi naman tayo ma-expert sa military operations. We are occupied right now. We are occupied. So it's conquest through occupation and actual occupation. Then the fifth approach is conquest through bribery. Sinuportahan, binayaran, mga congressmen. Panalo yung karamihan yan dahil sa Smartmatic kontrolado nila. Ang senators, 24 senators, panalo yan dahil kontrolado nila yung Smartmatic. Wala pang eleksyon, alam na nila kung sinong senador. Biro mo, yung tagpahid lang tayo naging senador. Yung si Bato na medyo komedyante, naging senador. About 250, 33,000 congressmen, about 250,000, 250 are not lawyers. Kaya paano nangyari yan? Kasi wala Smartmatic control. Yung senators, about 24, mga 18 yan, hindi abogado. Why? Hindi kontrolado ng INCIC yung Smartmatic. We have been controlled, I would say, electronically. High-tech na ang control sa atin. Wala tayo sa atin. Kung wala, nagbuto-buto tayo. Bumuto tayo, pero that is not counted. What is counted is what the Smartmatic will tell you. Ito ang senador, si Mongo, si Pacquiao, si Bato. Yun. Yung election natin para house show na lang yan. Kung wari na lang may election. So, sixth, ayun, ang ginawa nila. Number 6, political interference. Through use of congressmen, senators, and use of local puppet like Duterte. Local puppet, mga mercenaries. And 7, itong pinakamalala, hindi sinadya ng mga Amerikanong bigyan smallpox sa mga Indian, no? Na wala yung 90% ng mga Indians, hindi sinadya. Pero sinadya ng mga insect na gamitin ang coronavirus para mawala ang Pilipino. Yung natural calamity noon, of long time ago, ngayon intentional na ang paggamit ng insect. Gumagamit na ng coronavirus para mawala ang Pilipino, ang maiwan lang mga insect. Maski nagkandamatay lang milyon-milyon, 2 billion sila, may maiwan talaga. Tayo, pag namatay 100 million, wala na tayo, impas. Plus, dagdagan pa ng massive migration, saan ba tayo? Kaya nga ako, ang ginawa ko, I'm creating a 20 million man army. 20 million man army. Kayo nakinig sa akin, kayo mga sundalo, mag-join kayo. If you care about democracy, if you care about this country, if you want this country to live for 1,000 years, you join. Support this army. Let us build a 20 million man army that can more or less take care of the 2 million army of China. Because all of us in the Philippines will be members of the armed forces of the Philippines. Pati yung mga bata, membro. Babae, membro. Lahat, membro. Tayo lalaban para sa kinabukasan nating mga anak. Tutulungan niyo ako. Huwag niyo akong laitin ng laitin. Wala naman kayo magkuha ng lait sa akin. Sino bang tumatayo against China sa Pilipinas ngayon? Si Robredo? Si Trillanes? Si Bamakino? Si Bongo? Sino bang tumatayo? Ako, ang totoong presidente ng Pilipinas, ginampanan ko ang tungkulin ko. I'm standing here against China without fear of losing my life kung mangyari man. Kasi mahal na mahal ko ang Pilipinas. Mahal ko kayo. Maniwala kayo sa hindi. Kaya gusto kong tulungan niyo ako to build a 20 million man army. Build 20 million man army to defend this country, to preserve this country in this part of the universe forever. I don't want the Philippines to be a province of China. I don't want the Philippines to be a province of any other country. I want the Philippines to remain a country forever if possible. And you are the only ones who can help me. Pero nagpabungol-bungol kayo, nagpapatay-patay kayo. I've been talking to you for many times already through video messages. Walang nag-respond. Nilalait pa niyo ako. But sino ba ang lumalaban sa China ngayon? Sino ang tumatayo against China ngayon? Itong taong nilalait ninyo. But before God, before the law, I am the true president of the Philippines. And I want you to support me because I'm standing for the Philippines. I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting for the future of your children. I'm fighting for the future of this country. I'm fighting in the name of the greatest God of all gods, the greatest Batalan. Iyon ang ginagawa ko. So sana po, mag-isa tayo. If we were disunited before, and it was easy for foreigners to conquer us because we were disunited, now I want you to unite with me. I want you to swallow your pride and follow me. Because I'm going to lead you to that sunlit plain of freedom and liberty, where all Filipinos will have homes, will have a house he can call his home, will have a job, will have employment. Hindi na maging alipin ng mga inchik, hindi maging alipin ng mga dayuhan, maging tunay na Filipino. I want you to help me revive that old Filipino long time ago na lumalaban. Because we as a people, sana sabi ko na noon, have a secret tradition to uphold. And that is the tradition to live in dignity and with honor. When that tradition is trampled upon, when foreigners and even our own brothers will trample our secret traditions, that becomes imperative. It becomes imperative for all of us to rise up and demand respect from the rest of the world until the whole world, the whole universe will learn to respect the Filipino people. Ano po, tulungan ninyo ako. Kasi kung hindi tayo lumalaban, walang mangyari sa atin. Sinasabi noon, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Lalaban tayo. You stand up and be proud card-carrying members of the Malayan race. Be proud, Malayan. Be proud of who you are. You are not inferior to anyone. You are not created to be a follower of anyone. You are created to rise to the level of the gods and somehow, someday, rule the universe with God. Yun ang destiny natin. So, sana tutulong kayo. Magkaisa tayo. Kasi with unity, there is victory. I think I have said enough. Bow down your heads and join me in prayer. Our Father who lives everywhere and beyond compare, hallowed be your name. Thank you for showing us that our mission is to become as pure and perfect as you are, and justly rule the moons, the suns, and the sea of awesome stars in the realm and regions of your love. Your kingdom is boundless, ageless, and shapeless, wherein and wherefore everything, living or non-living, seen or unseen, is equally seated at the very center of a loving and living universe. Give us this day the capacity to produce life's energy and daily bread. Make us learn purifying and healing lessons from our feelings and misdeeds. Give us the patience and the strength to support those who are in need. Kindly care for those who are sick and dying in pain and hopelessness. And help us share in pain, the pain of others. Share in a food and hopeless people and suffering masses, forlorn and forgotten, even with their loved ones, from whom they expect some words of hope and consolation. Grant us the wisdom to embrace the virtues of bravery, kindness, and righteousness, and thereby emulate your majesty and holiness. Keep and protect us in the warmth of your sacred heart and consciousness. Then lead us from the depths and darkening shadows of ignorance and greed to the sunlit plain of paradise, justice, and eternal bliss. For yours alone is the supreme power, the grandeur, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Maraming salamat sa inyong pagpakinig. Sana po lalaban kayo, so that when today shall have become a living part of yesterday, merong magsabi sa atin, dili tanan natulog sa kagabihon sa atong kaliwat. Hindi lahat natulog sa gabi nating pagkalipin. Not all were asleep in the nights of our fathers. No todos dormían en las noches de nuestros abuelos. Thank you and good night.